Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. The House Ways and Means Committee late June 13th passed an economic growth package containing business and individual tax relief measures. There are some next steps involved, but right now we're going to find out what this means for you from Rohit Kumar. Rohit, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get into this economic package. It contains 3 bills. Talk to us about what's there, what's the significance, and what this means for companies.
Yeah, so there are 3 bills. One was a purely individual title, increasing the standard deduction by $2,000 for singles, $4,000 married filing jointly, just through 2025, lining it up with, as a reminder, the so-called fiscal cliff, where all the individual and pass-through provisions from the 2017 Act expire. Then there was a small business tax relief sort of title, very focused on small businesses, 179 expensing, things like that. And then there was the stuff that I think the people watching are going to mostly care about, the sort of corporate title. It had a 4-year extension of the 174 relief, so you could fully fully expense your 174 expenses, retroactive to 2022, and that became a little bit of a point of contention about the wisdom of retroactive relief. But again, through 2025, 163J relief, so 30% of EBITDA, not 30% of EBIT, again, retroactive 2022 through 2025, and then full expensing, which started to phase down at the beginning of this year from 100% to 80%, making that 100% again through 2025. So those 3 provisions were sort of the TCJA provisions. Now this, unlike the other 2 bills I just discussed, was more than fully paid for by either repeal or modification of various Inflation Reduction Act incentives. I think that is mostly for the optics of showing that the packages in total are basically paid for. They're about, if you put all 3 bills together, it's still about $24 billion added to the deficit. Republicans were clear, we're not doing this to pay for it. We're doing this because we think these tweaks to the Inflation Reduction Act are more than tweaks, are the right policy. So that's sort of big picture what's going on. And really, I think broadly speaking, what folks should be paying attention to is this is the Republicans' kind of opening bid on a year-end extenders package. Everyone knows that we're not going to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act credits as a part of this Congress with President Biden still in office, but there is legitimate interest in the TCJA provisions. There's legitimate interest in some of the individual stuff, including some things that were not in these bills, like an expansion of the child tax credit. And you saw some of that if you were watching all 12 hours of the markup. You saw some of that in the rhetoric of, these are some things we like, but we need to do more. The more is not in this bill. We will have to have a collateral conversation about the more that makes this all kind of hang together.
So we've done the 12 hours, and we're going to continue watching this. What are the next steps? What can we expect in the future?
So the next step, the immediate next step is, in terms of what we will all see kind of front and center, is that these bills will go to the House floor. Now, there were 4 bills marked up. There was a separate Taiwan measure that's sort of on its own. It's a trade bill, kind of its own separate track. But the 3 tax bills, the small business bill, the individual, and the corporate, we expect those to be combined into one measure before they get to the House floor. So that'll happen at the House Rules Committee. Initial reports would suggest they might be trying to go to the floor as early as next week. Now, for those that have been watching the House floor has become a somewhat chaotic venue with House Freedom Caucus members expressing unhappiness about the debt limit agreement. So I wouldn't necessarily, bank on it happening next week, but at some point before the 4th of July, they would like to get this bill to the House floor, off the House floor, send it to the Senate, and then the next thing that will happen, which will be sort of behind the scenes, is those necessary conversations about what are we doing on the child tax credit, low-income housing tax credit. There are some other kind of proposals floating around that weren't included here that I think become a part of a year-end package.
Okay. And one thing I'm really curious about are the questions that you are getting from companies. What are they, and how have you responded?
So the questions kind of come largely in 2 categories. Is this going to happen this year? And if it does happen, will it be seamless extensions going back to when these provisions expired, or is there going to be some sort of gap year in between? Increasingly, despite a little bit of dust up over retroactivity at the markup yesterday, I do think that if we get these things done this year, it'll be seamless back to 1/1/22 for 174 and 163J, and seamless to 1/1/23 for full expensing. Whether it gets done this year, look, I am optimistic. I think there is better than a 50-50 shot that we get something done this year. It's not a guarantee. You cannot round that up to 100%. There is a risk of failure still in the system. Divided government is hard. If you watched what happened yesterday, there was some acrimony in the system, right? Democrats are still unhappy about the things that happened in 2017. Republicans are unhappy about some of the things that happened in 2021. So this place is not without its
Right.
friction points, and those will have to be worked through. But increasingly, we're getting a sense from lawmakers, like they understand they have to do something this year.
Yep.
Both sides are motivated to do something. So I think they get there, but this is not going to happen on its own. It's going to require continued involvement from the taxpaying community to kind of incentivize Congress to act on these measures.
But staying with your optimistic viewpoint, could you clarify what timing would look like when you say this could happen this year?
Oh, so I think the most likely result is we do this somewhere between Thanksgiving and the end of calendar year. So this is a Q4 event. There is at least the possibility, although it's not an overwhelming possibility, it's less than 50-50 to be sure, that around September 30th with a government funding bill that would have to pass, that you could maybe hitch a ride on that, especially if the Federal Aviation Administration has not been fully reauthorized by then, and we have to reauthorize on a temporary basis at least the excise taxes that we all pay when we buy a plane ticket, so that becomes a revenue measure. But increasingly, I'm feeling like this is more Q4 than Q3.
Okay. All right, Rohit, thank you as always.
Thanks for having me.
For more on the economic growth package, take a look at the PwC Insight linked in the description of this episode. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned to Policy on Demand for the latest developments from Washington and around the world. Take care.